Welcome to RockIT, your unfair advantage from a technical perspective and all things business when it comes to what's new and happening. I'm your host, Daniel Robus, a guest. I haven't been here for a while. I'm loving the fact that I'm back. I hope you enjoy this podcast edition because we are meeting interesting people. Louise and Nico, who are joining us from Procentrica. I'm going to get an introduction very soon, and I'm going to spring something new on them. But if you enjoyed this episode and you want to contact Louise and Nico from Procentrica, their website will be in the bottom of the show notes, or you can just reach out to us from Chiief and we'll give you their contact details. So let's start with Louise. You founded Procentrica a few years ago. It's been going through COVID and beyond. Why did you start your own business? Where did you come from? And why did you start your own business?
I started Procentrica 20 years ago. I can't believe it's 20 years ago.
Your baby is no longer a baby.
Yeah, it's going to varsity now.
Tell us a little bit about the journey of how we arrived on the couch today.
25 years ago, I worked as a programmer for Investec Bank. I did C++ programming for them. I was at IQ Business Group, the lead programmer for a hardcore technical team. And one day I got tired of it because you can be technical I could be technical for a period of time, and then it was just, I missed people. So at a point, I started getting introduced into process, and I liked it. With process, you have a lot of interaction with business, and there's a technical component to it. But I did not like the culture of product pushing. So I did not enjoy that sometimes product sales was more important than value to the customer, to be honest. So I wanted to start a process company that focused on pure consulting, that is academically pure, and we tell the truth to the customer. So that's a thing to say. Sometimes you don't need new fancy technology. Sometimes what you've got in your cupboard is enough. We just need to look at your processes and optimize it.
Okay. So, and that's taken us into today, and we'll talk around BPM and some of the pitfalls that people have seen. But if you had to say, what is a Procentrica experience for a customer that you would like in a 30 seconds brief, what do people get when they work with your team?
Value, honest feedback, and competence.
Excellent. Which from a South African perspective is something we're challenged with all the time because of people leaving. And I'm going to dive into why people stay with Procentrica here. So you can think about that. To your right, we've got Nico. Now, Nico, you've also been here for a while, but you've been around for a little bit longer as well. How did you end up at Procentrica? What's your journey to success here?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, you won't believe where my educational history started. I'm actually a lawyer by trade.
And he admitted that on camera. Amazing.
Yeah, so I was in Sambo's legal department, and you have to be really old to remember Sambo.
Yeah.
But one of the guys that I used to work with started an interesting BPM project, and he wanted me to be part of it. Coming from sales and collections as such for the home loans components of the bank. So I joined up the project to get the BPM process entrenched and installed in the bank for the first time.
Okay.
This was in 1999 when computers were still big boxes and the screens were big CRT monitors. So it was cutting edge technology at that point in time. And from there, I literally just moved from BPM implementation to the next. I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of work with international banks as well. And it gives you a good perspective to see the difference in technology and maturity of technology compared to South African banks.
Amazing. So Nico, how did you end up at Procentrica?
So I've been involved with BPM for most of my career. with various customers and clients. I've done consulting internationally, and Procentrica used to be one of our key competitors. So Louise and I, at one point in time, were friends but enemies, and enemies but friends, competing for the same kind of business.
Yeah.
And 10 years ago, I basically just decided if you can't beat them, join them.
Amazing.
So I joined the Procentrica team.
Amazing. And what does BPM mean to you? What does it stand for, and what does it mean in your everyday job?
All right, so BPM is business process management and the automation thereof.
Okay.
So BPM should not be confused with something like simple case management and workflow.
Okay.
So let me give you an example. Case management and workflow would be a very simple 3, 4, 5 step process where a limited number of users are involved and a limited number of steps and user interfaces are involved.
Okay.
Usually simple little processes like apply for leave, approve leave, granted, that kind of a simple little workflow process. BPM is much more complex than that. BPM sometimes has been, well, I like to explain BPM as it's the glue that sticks everything in the organization together.
Okay.
So you would literally have front-end components, you would have middleware components, you would some automation and integration to like rules and scoring engines. And then at the end of the process, you would have something like account opening, if you're looking at like an account opening process. And across all the layers, BPM flows and touches every single one of those components. So that's BPM, not 3-step process.
Okay.
End-to-end automation of a very complex business process.
So we're going to be crossing departments, we're going to be crossing decision makers, we're going to be crossing into various areas end to end from an organizational perspective. Where does it fit into the broader strategy today then? Does it have an agenda point at the C-level, or is this a tactical program that we're running?
So as a CIO, you should not be thinking BPM. So for example, if I'm the CIO of Bank A, how will my bank be better than Bank B?
From an account opening perspective or a
client perspective.
Okay.
So ultimately, in today's age, we can't just think of account opening. We need to think of customer impact.
Okay.
So that absolutely speaks to strategy. So the minute you start thinking of products or processes within your bank, you also need to think of experience. Further implications would be the silos within the bank. If your customer had to apply for a credit card and a check account and a mortgage, the customer experience would be horrendous. So that all speaks to strategy. And strategy then informs your value chain of your bank. So your customer interaction points, your value chain informs all your processes within the bank, and your processes is your business capabilities.
Okay.
And then process really comes into play, and we can start thinking of optimizations.
So if we had to take that, and I know we're speaking financial services sector here, is it the same in distribution? Is it the same in all industries, or do we have unique customer problems that we're solving in each of them? So my question was actually, what are the 4 customer problems that we're solving today that weren't there yesterday? But are there industry specifics, and does Procentrica focus on an industry group, or is there business problems that we solve? Where would you put it?
So I would definitely say there's business problems. There is generic problems we encounter, and we've encountered in the last 20 years. Do you agree?
100%. I also think that from a starting point of view, and that's where Louise said right up front, you don't need fancy technology right away. initially you need to understand what your pain points are.
Okay.
If you can't identify and define your current pain points and your strategy of what you want to try to improve, you can buy anything and it's not going to work for you.
Awesome. So what would you say are the top 4 that you keep coming against?
So I would say definitely from my side, not understanding who does what in your organization.
As simple as that.
As simple as that. You often have people where you have cross-pollination of roles, but they don't understand what person A versus person B does.
Okay.
And the work gets done several times over. Things get captured repeatedly. Customers have an exceptionally bad experience because they get asked for the same thing from different people.
I want to jump in here.
Yeah.
Sure,
So we worked recently with a logistics company, and in today's age and where we are with technology, we shouldn't be recapturing stuff. We've got integration, we've got microservices, all these beautiful things.
Yeah.
I followed a truck in this logistics company, and I kid you not, the whole process unlocks according to the odometer reading, because the odometer reading informs how far this truck drove, what's the invoicing, how much petrol was spent, blah, blah, blah. And the odometer reading was recaptured in one day 53 times. And we still have Excel spreadsheets, we still have reports done on X and pie graphs based on these odometer readings. And yet, yes, there's BizTalk integration, there's all these beautiful things theoretically, but...
And the capture was for good reasons in that silo, but just...
And it makes sense for them, but...
But no one's looked at it from a
yes.
10,000 foot.
Yes.
We haven't extrapolated out. So that's where you start. You actually start questioning why you're doing things the way they're doing it. Do you see people pushing against those questions in their silos?
Absolutely.
Is that a big part of this?
Absolutely. And big resistance. So, of course, you get wonderful customers that embrace change. And, I mean, who doesn't love change? So, most often than not, people do not want to change their processes. And if you have an older generation that have been doing it a certain way.
Careful.
Older, and you're looking at me.
Yeah. We're looking at Dion and
They
Dan.
don't want to change.
Yeah.
So there's a big buzzword that we encounter all the time. We're going to digitize and transform. Yeah. But people do not want to change. So how do you transform without a big impact on the organization, on the organizational model? So it's quite difficult.
Sure.
That's generally one of the pitfalls of implementing BPM, is getting complete buy-in from all stakeholders. Because you often have this shiny new technology being pushed down from the executive level. We have to have the newest, bestest BPM tool. But as it filters down in the organization and actually gets implemented, you start encountering more and more resistance.
Sure.
Because people are having to do something differently to how they did it last year.
More than that, there's also resistance. About 10 years ago, we did a project at a client who I'm not going to name. And it was a long-running BPM process. And it was a successful, fantastic implementation that worked well up until a point. So I would say 70% of the project, or the process rather, worked perfect. We were erecting stores. We were building stores. So it's a strange thing to put into BPM, but it worked. We leased agreements, or we rented something, or we bought a piece of land. We made sure that the builder was involved, cement were ordered, all through BPM. Legal was involved. And we managed this whole long-running process to build a store. Up until a point when it got to facilities, it didn't work. It stopped. And we investigated. The facility manager instructed his team not to use BPM because it's a waste of time, and we can do this simpler and easier. And once a month, he would be escalated, and they would go sit in front of their computers and in the text box write I 11111 22222 and just push everything through in an hour with nonsense data. So we investigated it further. Turned out this guy was in charge of making sure that the tenders went out for the building contracts, and he had his own building company, and BPM exposed him. He funneled all the money, all the contract work to himself. Wow. So it's more than just resistance.
So, I mean, we were talking around that a little bit in prep, but do you think people hide behind their Excel spreadsheets to cover bad management?
Absolutely.
And you see that again and again. And what does BPM then do? Like this example, it's exposing almost fraud. What else do you think BPM shows up?
Or hides.
Hides.
So we've seen it often where you've got a manager that was promoted for whatever reason, which made political sense or sense within the organization, but he's not necessarily the correct person for the role. And then BPM is a tool for him to help manage his staff.
Oh, wow. So if you get a junior manager that's been put into a position and you know they're carrying risk, BPM can actually support them to grow into the role.
But it shouldn't.
Why not?
If you can't inspire people, you shouldn't be in a management position.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to that. I like that one. So we've known about, yellow sticky notes and processing, and anyone from a project management background, we've looked at number of paths through, and we've got the Gantt chart, and we've got the, the processes that we map and whatever. How's BPM evolved with this explosion now? And I know you're probably going to throw a piece of paper at me, but AI and this machine learning, where's BPM gone in the last year that's excited you?
We're very excited about something we got right recently.
Yeah.
We work with a lot of banks, and across all our clients, we still have back offices where we've got a lot of people that interprets bank statements, pay slips, because the pay slips between the three of us it's not standard.
Yeah.
So you can't predict what to expect. So what we've done is we've employed AI to read the pay slips and tell us what the guy earns, and then take his bank statement, which again is not a standard format. You know what to expect, but it's not perfect. Read the pay slip against the bank statement, interpret it, and tell the back office user whether the pay slip and the bank statement correlates, and the expenses are grouped into this, and this is what he declared in his application form, or it's not the same at all. So that's pretty cool stuff.
Wow, that's exciting stuff.
Yes, that's
exciting stuff. Depending if you're checking my bank statement and my tax returns, we'll just leave that alone. How's that gone down with customers, Nico?
So I think at the moment there's a big hype train around AI. Everyone wants to be involved with AI. But you have to understand that AI is not going to replace BPM. BPM is not going to replace AI. My view is that AI really enhances what you can offer with BPM. It enhances the capabilities, and it reduces some of the manual work and the laborious activities that users...
Like we just spoke
like
about.
we've just spoken about.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, any process, no matter how well designed or automated, will always have a component of human interaction. But you're never going to get away fully from that.
Yes.
And if you use AI correctly, like Louise has explained, you can take a lot of pain and effort away from the users to let them focus on something more productive.
Awesome.
Than trying to focus on a pay slip versus a bank statement. Is the net in the bank the same as on the pay slip? That's a very... and historically, OCR tools have battled to do that, because simply the large differentiators between pay slips and bank statements. It's
Totally.
virtually impossible.
And your high net worth clients, so the clients you really want to focus on, their bank statements 20, 30 pages long. That's a lot of transactions to work through and to make sure that it correlates with your application form, where AI does it in seconds. So it's brilliant.
So if you're lucky enough to get to a greenfields customer,
It's happened.
if they still exist, those unicorns out there,
Call us.
standardized process or innovative process design, where do we go?
That is a very difficult
it's
balance
easy.
to get right.
Okay, we got dissent, people. I've got
Easy.
popcorn. We got a fight
It's
on the
easy.
couch. I love this.
We want to focus on reusability.
Okay.
So reusability, and we can achieve reusability. Help me with this. So reusability makes your process fast and makes your implementation fast. It lifts the quality because, but you have to break down your process into very modular little bits and pieces.
Okay.
And then if you reuse it 100 times, you make sure the quality is good, and immediately it raises the quality of your process. But
So you're a standardized person.
No.
Louise has just
No.
spoken exactly like our CIOs at one of our banks.
No.
Okay.
No. Reusability and quality is important, but
Totally.
absolutely innovation. If you don't stand out, you're going to die.
If you don't,
Stand out.
okay.
You have to.
Okay.
You have to. The competitive advantage here, process gives you such a competitive advantage, but you need to be smart about it.
Yeah,
Nico,
100%.
you wanted to add on there?
Yeah, so I 100% agree, standardization and reusable components. But the key to that is understanding how and where to standardize. You can never standardize everything. There's always a level of specialization that you can't get away from.
So that uniqueness that
Yes.
is your Procentrica feel, is whatever the French word
Well,
is.
or the difference between the flow of the process for one type of application or customer or division versus another. As
Okay.
much as the base steps are mostly the same, you will have some specialization. So the trick is, if you want to be able to innovate and standardize, you have to, like Louise says, design the processes at a very specific modular level, where you have building blocks of components that can be fully reused.
Okay.
You don't want 6 of the same type of yellow 6 square Lego blocks. You want 1 6 square
Yes.
yellow Lego block.
And you give that to customers, Louise? You give them a starting kit that they don't have to make all of this up?
No, absolutely. So we've done this so many times. We
Okay.
know we've got a playbook of a lot of components. We encounter the same problems, and we've built up.
So we don't wheel spin. We don't wheel spin when you start with the customer.
Even though I am.
And you don't expect them to be experts in BPM.
No.
What do they bring to the party that makes a successful engagement for you? What does the customer bring to the party?
Money.
Yeah. Well, okay, people, it's going to cost you some money, so have a wallet. What else do they bring?
The most successful projects we've ever done has executive sponsorship. They understand the strategic initiative and innovation that goes into it. We've got support in it, and they treat us as the experts. So we don't need to fight for our opinion. It's respected, and then we've done very well. Sometimes you do get customers that bring you in at the wrong level, and then it's an uphill battle.
Okay, when you start in the DBO, you start on the
Yes.
applications process. You've got a customer services manager who's got good intentions,
Yes.
but no clout.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And you come in from an IT perspective, and then you need to convince business, and that's hard.
Okay. If you had to think of a leading BPM implementation that kind of that sets the standards, or is one that you aspire to or have done, what would come to mind?
So most people, when they implement BPM, think process. step, one after the other.
Yeah.
And if you ask people, 99% will tell you BPM is a sequential process. You have to do this to do the next step. You have to do that to do the next step. The one that comes to mind is basically, it was my Waterloo moment where we were implementing a line onboarding process where customers applied for a line, a fixed line, data line, whatever, for one of the major communications companies. And the process became so messy and convoluted because all departments were able to move forwards and backwards to one another. And making this process work, it became such a big spaghetti. So we thought, why are we doing this? Because you literally had flows to and from all of the different workflows. So we said, we basically defined a couple of reusable subcomponents. We built them. And then we realized, but wait a minute, the process can be completely non-deterministic. There is actually no flow. And that might be very controversial in the BPM sense, but some processes don't have a sequence. You literally have to determine the sequence on the fly.
Wow.
And that's what we've done. So we wrote a rule set that determines where you are in the process, what's happened up to this point, and what still needs to happen. And then based on highest probability and algorithm, it decides what is the next best step to do.
So you're giving the business flexibility to operate without the constraints of it has to be this way, because that obviously impacts the customer experience. So now it can be these ways.
100%.
Wow.
So what the business did is they defined a whole bunch of these are the non-negotiable steps that we have to perform to get this process end to end and the line installed.
But this was telecommunications. We, at this very moment, doing an implementation at a bank in South Africa where we're doing the exact same thing. So if all three of us applied for a credit card, but you applied for a personal loan 2 weeks ago, he has never applied at this bank, so he's new to bank, and I'm an old customer or a young customer, whatever you might. And you've submitted your pay slip 2 weeks ago. I did it 2 months ago, and he's never done it. We shouldn't have the same experience.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't have the correct.
Yeah.
And if he's new to bank, his should be harder, and yours should be simple. So the process can't dictate that it's step 1, 2, 3, 4. You should skip a few steps because you applied 2 weeks ago.
Sure, that's going to be a mindset shift for a lot of folks in the BPM space on how they consult on this. How do you bring the customer along with you? Because this is quite a leap.
Well, it's innovation.
It's very difficult because the customer is used to exactly the 1, 2, 3 steps.
Yes.
And that's where the standardization and proper definition of process and components come in. Okay. You cannot have components that have multiple tasks. So, for example, if you have a process called evaluate the property, you can't in that process have an outcome of a valuation and then also have an outcome of a credit score. That breaks reusability.
Okay.
So your processes must be defined to the level where there's an expected outcome of yes or no, A or B, approved or declined, not several different outcomes for different scenarios.
You can build anything in Lego if your blocks are small enough.
Okay.
If you have big blocks, you can't.
That tells me that the type of people Procentrica put in front of a customer have to be very granular in their thinking and strategic. How do you find people to do this? What's the secret?
I'm very proud to say that I employ the most intelligent people in Johannesburg. I'm very proud to say it. It is hard to find them. Our Procentrica crew, none of them are rugby players. I've got nothing against rugby players, but they all did well in chess tournaments.
Okay.
They're very geeky, extremely smart, and they think. We give them riddles within our interview process.
Wow.
We make sure that they achieve top academic results. They have at least 1 degree. It's the funkiest people coming together, and what's really brilliant about it is we help each other.
Okay.
If you've got a difficult problem, even though the guys work on different sites, they'll brainstorm together. That's ultimately why Nico joined us. He was jealous of the fun we have together.
Sure. So thinking is not cheating is a maxim that
Correct.
you use. So we
Correct.
think a lot here, which leads me into the next space, which is what is the thinking a customer has to do before you come? Do you suggest software to them, or do they buy it first and then bring you in? How does it work? Or do they bring you in then buy software?
Ultimately, it has nothing to do with software. So ultimately,
Okay.
what we want to do is look at the problems they're experiencing.
Okay.
And we need to be able to bring value to the table, and we need to change something for them, solve a pain. And yes, sometimes it involves software and sometimes it involves training. It depends.
Okay. So if we've got customers that are spread, maybe they're doing operations in low-cost areas, like they might have a procurement center in Prague or in India, but they're based in South Africa and they've got London offices. How do you suggest to them then? Are they using open source? Are they using off-the-shelf product? How do we productize what we're doing from a BPM perspective?
So I think open source versus off the shelf is an interesting question, because it really speaks to your appetite for technical innovation and risk.
Okay.
So generally the open source products are much cheaper. They are usually more technically or technology involved. You'll need coding skills, you'll need to understand the infrastructure and the environment.
Okay.
And support is generally based on a user community group kind of support, where off the shelf is generally a much more robust kind of software that's been developed with a big expenditure by the vendor.
Okay.
You have much better support and maintenance options. They understand the environments and the technology very well, and they can help you with that. I think if you are looking at off the shelf, you're probably looking at more cost, obviously, because the vendor needs to justify all of the expense that he puts into developing the product. But then it's also usually more scalable for like enterprise, big corporate solutions, where the open source is suited with, because of the pricing and the relative agility of the software, it's much more flexible. It's usually sorted for the small and medium enterprise.
And what are you seeing people go with mainly in your stable of customers?
Our customers at the moment look at what's in the magic quadrant of Gartner and Forrester, because that's the best BPM in the world.
Okay.
And corporates want to, especially big financials, they're very risk averse.
Yeah.
They need to make sure what they buy can actually satisfy what they need to do.
If I can add to that, another big influence, whether they are in country. So it's a lot easier. So OpenText is very popular in South Africa because they've got a big office and you can walk in there and you can go scream at someone.
Or you can ask for help.
Or you can ask for help.
But we can scream. We can scream, yeah.
Where with Kumundo, there's no one here. So you can swear at them in your mind, or you can write a snotty email, but it's easier to climb into your car. So in-country presence is a thing.
Okay, I get that. And also, they're much cheaper from an open source perspective, but the long-term impact is you have to look after whatever you're doing there. So we've got to bear that in mind. If I had to ask you an unfair question, which is what do you advise to your customer from a software perspective, how would you go about doing that? It's
not unfair. And we often do it. So there's a few elements or lenses that we need to apply. We need to look at what are we trying to solve. Are we solving, for example, vehicle finance, and is the sales agent, on his phone? So do we need a mobile application, or are we talking about people in remote areas without a lot of internet connectivity? So there's a lot of architectural components that need to be considered. Then budget is a question.
Okay.
We need to make sure that it falls within the budget, but ultimately, if budget wasn't an issue, then absolutely, then we go to the big boys. But
okay, if I find a customer where budget is no issue,
wonderful.
That'll be amazing. That'll be wonderful.
Yes.
Okay, no, but what I'm taking away from that is you can talk a customer through. They don't have to come with anything. They can just come with a problem. And again, I'm going to go back to what is the ICP, what is the ideal customer profile from a Procentrica perspective? What do they look like? What are they dealing with?
So the perfect customer has been in business, is successful, but he is not there yet. We need to increase profitability.
Okay. So
they've got a running process, they've got a viable business, but we need to stand out from the competition, or we need to increase our market share, or they've got a lot of people working and they are making money, but not enough. That's our ultimate customer. We've done it before. May I go into an example?
Yeah, please. That would be super.
Okay. When we started Procentrica, and it's 20 years ago, this was our first customer. Let me not name them. There was a bank that tried an innovative concept way back in the day. So we are talking 2005. They started a branch without a brick and mortar building. So it was a concept branch where it's an internet branch.
Wow.
And it was revolutionary at the time, and it didn't work. So people wanted to go in, and you wanted, and regardless. So the branch only employed 20 employees, and those 20 employees was responsible for everything. They needed to be the credit manager and the fulfillment agent and the calls, everything. And it didn't make money because the 20 people could only manage 20 applications a day. And 20 applications a day is not enough to make a branch
viable
or profitable. So it was a greenfields project for us. The CIO, luckily I knew him, he called me and he asked me, come try something. I'll give you 3 months. Try something, do anything. And it's brilliant because now you don't have architectural forums and it's greenfields and you can prove some points. So we did it, and we ended up being there 2 years, and we increased in the first 3 months, we increased from 20 applications a day to 600 without employing anyone else. So purely from automation, integration, just doing things smarter. That's a brilliant project.
Yeah.
Because it became hugely profitable in the end, and it's still going today.
That's amazing. I love stories like that. I love the fact that the CIO can take a bit of a risk with it.
Yes.
Because we are working, because we are already doing numbers, it's not like a big investment. We can just tweak, and I really like that. If you had to say to a new customer 4 things that they need to prepare before BPM transformation. I know we spoke about stakeholder buy-in. We need someone on the top level to have been in there. What are the other 3 things they need to prep before we let Nico and the team in there? What would you say ideally you want them to prep?
I think understanding your basically your strategy and your objectives, that's important. You also have to understand your process. So you have to understand what you want to do.
Okay.
With BPM. It's not a case of someone's going to walk in there and tell you how to do it and what to do.
Yeah.
You need to understand exactly what you want to try to achieve. That's why the strategic objectives and
Okay.
Buy-in from an executive level of what this project will aim to achieve is most important.
Nico, if we've finished a project, what does a good manager take advantage of BPM in order to be a great manager? What does good management and a blend of BPM look like?
So I think for starters, BPM doesn't manage people. People manage people. So if you're a good manager, you will take advantage of the tools and the capabilities that BPM offer you. So it gives you a view across your process around which people are performing really well, which people are struggling. So throughput on process, people that have to do rework over and over, you can very quickly start identifying trends of where employees would need some coaching, assistance, training, and which employees are really superstars that fly through the process and could potentially take on more responsibilities or more complex roles.
Awesome. I know this, Louise, this sits close to your heart of poor managers that are getting away with murder because they're hidden in the details. How would you answer that question? How do better managers, good managers, become better managers using BPM in your mind? And the second part of the question is, those people that are afraid they're going to lose their jobs, how do we keep them checked in because of what BPM can do for them?
BPM can't solve all problems.
Okay.
Good managers can become better managers with BPM. I agree with that, because it gives you complete insight into your department. It shows you the throughput. It shows you, like Nico said, who's better, who's bottlenecks, where you have a problem. It gives you a way to strategize about what I'm doing in this department, how I can improve it. But you should never disregard creativity of the guys working for you. Okay. And you should still be talking to them, consulting with them, thinking of innovation, even in this little department, against, well, the silos and all the competitiveness in the organization. We can still employ creativeness and innovation within this department. Okay. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
So now, if we've given them the BPM process, yes. Now how can they keep the staff engaged? How do they make sure the staff are not worried about losing their jobs? What would you advise them?
BPM has a very big impact on exactly that, because most staff will lose their jobs. If we automate this properly, you don't need as many people working for you. So the implication is you lift your staff. So I stop interpreting bank statements and pay slips because AI is doing it for me. So now I get to have a better job.
I get more time to spend with the customer.
And come up with innovative ideas or new products, or upskill myself and be a knowledge worker rather than a data capturer.
Excellent. I really like that. And I think that's the unseen part of this is buying back time doesn't mean we are sending people home.
Correct.
It means they can be doing a more professional job.
Correct.
So training L&D teams need to get close to the BPM partner to see the impact on the workers. I like that. Louise, I know this is close to your heart. So what advice would you give a CIO dealing with a failing BPM project? Where would you go?
What I wouldn't do is I won't tell him to look at the technology. Often we're currently sitting with a customer that believes it's a failing BPM project, therefore they need to reconsider the technology. It's not the case at all. As a CIO, you need to look at the KPIs you've got in place, at the reward system you've got in place for the managers.
Okay.
And I'm going to illustrate with an example. If Nico is the customer that needs money, so his mom is in hospital and he needs to pay 50,000 Rand towards her medical operation he will apply for credit. So at a bank, you've got various options to apply for credit. You could apply for a personal loan. You can apply for a credit card. You can look at your mortgage and get an advance loan. What do you call that?
Re-advance.
Re-advance and take money out of your mortgage loan. Within the bank operates within silos. So credit card would be a silo versus, let's say, a personal loan. Mm-hmm. Both of these silos will compete for Nico's business because they get incentivized. Their bonuses will be bigger if they get the business. So at the end of the day, the bank looks at profitability of the silo, yet they'll say we are customer centric, but they don't reward Nico's best advice. They reward which silo is the most profitable. Close the deal.
So it doesn't actually matter which one's actually better for Nico.
Correct.
Wow, that's very interesting.
That has nothing to do with BPM. So we can automate the hell of that out of that process, and it could be the best and most integrated and brilliant solution. But if you don't change the way you reward people, they won't change their behavior. What do you think?
Behavior is driven by reward.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. And in addition to that, more often than not, failing BPM implementations are as a result of not failed software or failed technology. It is the way you use it and implement it is not correct. So if you implement technology in a way that is not recommended by the vendor and not supported by the vendor, you can't really expect to have a positive outcome, can you?
Sure.
So let me give you a simple example. So 99% of, all BPM tools I've ever worked with, and I've worked with probably 6 or 7, they all have an underpinning database or a data set or a data store. If you choose to implement BPM with no underpinned data set and you choose to make it like an data agnostic system, you will have difficulty with MIS reporting. You will have difficulty with tracking normal audit trail behaviors, normal process data. And things like that people do because they think it's innovative and it's funky and it's new and we have one data store and everything is agnostic of data. It becomes a problem in the long run when you realize now you are actually missing the data that you should have implemented the database for right in the beginning.
That really resonates with me. That if you give us too many options, we're not going to choose anything. And I think we've got to be quite clear on that, which is nice. I guess it's a question for both of you. What specific changes can a client expect by working with Procentrica? If you had to summarize it in 3, what would change for them? Why you?
Okay, that's simple. We're honest. We bring a lot of value, and there's strategy and innovation behind what we do.
I love that. That's succinct. Nico?
So I'll just give you a little quote, the famous Kimi Räikkönen quote.
Yeah.
You can drop Procentrica people in a project and leave them alone. They know what they're doing.
I love that. That's very cool. Okay. For a customer who's never going to do business with you, where do they find more about BPM strategies and trends? Where's your go-to to upskill yourself?
You do this.
Yeah, so I think the market moves very quickly. And because we're agnostic and we're partners with several major players and vendors, you sit on the change boards, you look at the release, the roadmaps, you look at the new release plans and what's in the pipeline development-wise. And obviously you have to read. You have to read up a lot and understand where the thinking's going.
And is it as simple as Googling BPM trends in the market and then go from there down a rabbit hole, Warren? Or do you have
most likely, yes. You can find a lot on the internet these days, and it drives you. The more you focus on something, the more focused the information will become.
Also, the conferences.
Yeah, so use
lots of conferences.
What is your top conference? What do you recommend?
Well, I would recommend to anyone going to the OpenTech Summit, which is once a year. It's this year in September, and there's a lot of information and practical examples.
Excellent. I really like the OpenTech Summit. They share so much information. They share so much. They try and get you up to speed and empowered. Yes. Because this is quite a scary area, you know. It's this whole BPM, we've just invested in an ERP platform, and we've invested in a CRM platform. And
it shouldn't be scary. So if you start simple, and you can really start simple, you just look at the absolute core of the business. Where do we make money and where do we bleed money? And it should never be more than 5 plus or minus 2 processes. You can drill any big bank down to 5 plus or minus 2
core processes.
So that's already simplified. And then when you look at the simplified processes, how do we re-engineer it and stand out? It's not that hard.
Well, you've just given me advice for businesses considering BPM, and if I speak back to you what I just heard there, the first part that we're going to look at is what are those 5 core processes, plus or minus 2, that make us who we are, that pay the bills, and where are we losing control? Where have we got too many people, or where have we got too little control from an exec perspective? We should be able to see those processes. If you can't, you need to come and speak to the Procentrica team, and they can talk to you about how you can do that. How do customers measure ROI of a BPM engagement? Do they?
Not often, eh?
Not
often. They should.
So how do you get payback for a project like this? How do you unlock the vault?
When you start a project, you should absolutely measure where you are. I don't go on a diet without weighing myself in the beginning and at the end. So you should. Often what we look at is the book. So how much did our book grow for any organization? Most of all our projects should have a significant customer impact, which should be positive, and it should grow the book.
Okay.
So we can compare that we expected from last year July to this year July the book to grow by 9% because it's consistent. But now if it's growing by 23% and we're getting a lot of customer feedback that's positive, it's definitely a BPM. And
you can look at the operating model changes as well. So how much are you able to improve throughput with either the same number of resources, or how much are you able to reduce the number of resources in the value stream to achieve the same throughput?
Then another thing, in a banking example, there's a cost to onboarding a customer. And that cost is standard, or it's known. Not standard, known, sorry. And after a BPM project, that has to significantly reduce. And if it doesn't, you're doing it wrong. So
that's a big Pepsi challenge you just put out there. That is a huge one.
It's true. The whole that would be the point of automation.
So there's a lot of misconceptions out there about BPM then. I mean, if we've just spoken about those 3 things, we're struggling to get people to unlock the budget for it, but it makes that big a difference. What is the most common misconception about BPM that you wish the C-level understood?
Anyone can do it.
Oh, is that? Do you get that, Yahweh? My cousin's a BPM consultant.
Absolutely.
He can come and do this for us.
We can do it internally, or I know this guy, or my brother.
You know,
Not
he's going to
everyone
do the
can
garden,
do it.
he's going to clean the house, and he's going to do our BPM project. Is that?
I cannot overstress this enough. So we have come across it so many times, and there's a lot of companies out there that drive product sales, and I wish I'm allowed to know.
No, you
to
can't.
name
You
them.
can't.
I want to
You
name
can't.
them.
Yeah.
And once the product sale has gone through and the commission has passed, they do the bum and seats model. No, they give them resources, but we have encountered so many projects where a guy and a poor soul will sit on a seat and he needs to implement BPM solution. He doesn't have the background, he doesn't have the training, and we don't do that.
Okay. So what do you look for in a partner? What should they look for in a partner?
Competence, education, experience,
Okay.
know-how.
So do they look at the CV or do they go to a
They
customer
trust the
reference?
sales guy usually.
Okay, but what would you suggest? How do we go?
Do homework. You're spending a lot of money. The implementation of a BPM project, it's significant, it's expensive. Make sure that the guy you allow to touch your sensitive data and your critical systems and your security is qualified, is competent.
Sure.
You're not exactly.
It's a big thing.
You're
It
not
is.
exactly going to buy a Porsche and then let the gardener quickly service it for you.
Exactly.
Nico, what's the most common misconception about BPM you wish executives understood better?
If we implement BPM, our problems will be solved.
Yes.
And that is
So there's
so untrue.
Okay.
Because a horrifically bad process can be automated. It will still be a horrifically bad process.
It'll be faster.
It will be faster.
But it'll be faster.
Correct. It'll be a
Okay.
bad, fast process, and it'll still be a horrifically bad process.
Yes, that's very true.
So people think that if they implement BPM, it's going to automatically improve everything. That's not the case.
We've just made up a word there, automagically. I'm stealing that word. That is a great word for today. And BPM doesn't automagically fix things.
It doesn't
No.
automatically do anything.
Okay.
No.
You have to understand what you're doing, you have to understand process, and you have to understand the tool that you're working with.
Yes.
Okay. And Procentrica can give that to a customer in a safe, secure environment. How do they contact you? Where do they contact you? What do you like people to ask?
You can contact us at info@procentrica.co.za. We're on the website. My phone number's on there. Give us a call.
Brilliant.
We happily share some customer reference sites and show successes.
And you guys are based in South Africa and you work globally as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So time zones are not an issue
No,
from
no.
your perspective.
And we've got guys sitting in Europe. We've got guys we've got lower cost centers and South Africans that come to you on site. So
Excellent. That's brilliant.
it's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being open to answering questions. I know some of them have been a little bit uncomfortable, but you guys have been great guests. I just want to wrap up from our side, from RockIT. This has been really interesting. BPM's been close to my heart for a while, but I've known nothing about it. You know, I've been fond of the cousin, but never dived into it. Thank you for speaking English and not in TLAs. I really appreciate that. And good luck for
Thank
the
you.
rest of the year. May only good things come your way.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Daniel.
much.
From me, Daniel, signing off. Goodbye.